Yes, my name is Max Hanson, and I'm an attorney here at Arizona Law Group. I just joined this firm 3 weeks ago. So I'm new to this firm, but I've been practicing for 28 years in Arizona. I grew up in North Dakota, which not many people have been to. The population isn't very big. It's bigger than Wyoming, but that's about it. The best thing about growing up in a rural, less populated state like that is I had a lot of freedom growing up. My friends and I could go basically do what we wanted. Probably got into more trouble than we really needed to, but no harm, no foul. It was basically like any other small town. You can go outside, do what you want, just be back before the streetlights come on. And Arizona Law Group I came to, I've had conversations. I've known Scott for a number of years, and I've had conversations over the years with him and Amy Dorendorf, who I've had cases with. And this just seemed like a good fit. So I'm glad to be here. I graduated. I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. My father had a friend who was a judge and an attorney, small town attorney. I shadowed him for a couple days. I thought that was kind of interesting. He wasn't really enthusiastic about anybody going into law, but he'd been doing it for a long time, so I can understand that now. But I always like to argue. I always like to make my point. I always was able to talk my way out of things or into things. And so, my mother said, you should think about going to law school. And I got out of undergrad and I went, I don't want to teach. I don't want to, do other things. Maybe I'll try law school. And it just seemed to fit. I think it's basically helping people with, real people with real problems. I do family law. I've done plaintiff's personal injury. I've done civil litigation, but the theme throughout and what I take the most pride in is being able to help real people with real problems, whether they're getting a divorce or they're having a custody dispute or something else, or, I've also done criminal defense, or whether it's, they're in jail and they need help. All that's pretty rewarding, especially, when they come back afterwards, you've been successful and they're like, thank God you were there to help me.
Right.
I've gotten a lot of handwritten thank you cards over the years from clients and so forth. And that, people took the time to write out a thank you card. You don't see that this day and age all that much. That pretty much gives you a good feeling of, I was really able to help this person in this situation when they're at their lowest. I had a criminal defense case. I represented a client. He was homeless. Who hired me was basically a on-the-street church group who he had been a member of, or a member of their congregation where they had done outreach for. He got picked up for a possession of marijuana charge, etc., and also ended up being charged with felony, fleeing the police, and aggravated assault against a police officer. We got into the case. I thought it was going to be a sort of a plea. It ended up being where, the police officer injured himself, basically striking my guy in the back of the head as he was running away. And the police officer scraped his knuckles, and he called that aggravated assault against the officer. So we ended up having to go through some preliminary hearings and some other things, and ended up with the prosecutor agreeing to drop the charges, playing out to a simple misdemeanor case. And he was able to, through the efforts of the church group, put back together his life, go back to school, etc. That was really rewarding. But it taught me a lesson of, don't always judge a book by its cover. Delve into things a little deeper. Do your research, figure out what really has gone on here. I like to do hiking. I'm a swimmer, so I swim. I've been married for 32 years. I have 2 kids.
Aww.
My youngest is 11. She's on a competitive swim team, so a lot of my weekends are spent except for about a 3-week period in August, are spent going to swim meets and, volunteering, doing marshaling, that type of thing. I like to hike. I have certain sports teams, especially locally, that I follow. So I like watching a game or two. But a lot of family time. My first job was a unique job. It was, when I was 14, a bunch of us got hired to go pick rock out of farmers' fields. So North Dakota is part of the glacial plain. So the glacier went over the land. That's why it's so flat. That's also why the soil is so fertile. But it left things like big boulders and so forth. So they'd hire, young men, kids to go out for, what I thought was a fabulous wage of like $5 an hour to go pick boulders all day out of a farmer field. On the other hand, my first real job, once I was actually old enough to work legally, was as a lifeguard and swim instructor. So I did that for a number of years, taught little kids how to swim.